Okay, great. Wonderful. Hey, what's up? Everybody freaked out when I wore that robe. I don't know why everybody freaked out when I wore that hemp robe that I made. Yes, I actually did make that. I'm actually pretty good on a sewing machine, believe it or not. Everybody said I look like a Jedi. I love simplex analogies and metaphors. I'm about to give one. It only takes a flashlight and a filter. This is not a Christian concept, by the way. If you actually go online and look up the word consubstantiality, you'll come across a bunch of Judeo-Christian religious nonsense. I'm not interested in religion. I never discuss religion because religion is secularized metaphysics, and I'm not interested in any religions at all, nor discussing them. But this is actually not a religious concept. It is actually a... By the way, all religions borrow from, since religion is by definition both denotatively and connotatively secularized metaphysics, it's taken this from the ancient Greeks and the Egyptians and of course the Indians. All religions adopt really like neat stuff when it comes to metaphysical principles and concepts and hardcore philosophical principles of explaining things. Religion itself is devoid of that, and I'm not ragging on religions, however, I could easily do that. But I want to talk about consubstantiality, and also there are countless phrases, both in ancient Pali and Sanskrit and the Greek, ancient Greek, and I translate ancient Greek and ancient Pali. I've got a lot of Pali translations, even posted an article a few days ago. Statements that go such as this goes no further than that. In other words, when we're actually talking about metaphysical principles, we say it goes no further than this. It means there's a boundary point before which it doesn't exist. And I'm about to explain that in a very simplex way, far better than anybody else. Yeah, I know that sounds egotistical, but still, I'll explain it far better than anybody else. And so far as consubstantiality, you'll actually see references that this is dates back to the ancient Greek homoousion, meaning one and the same. Actually, depending on the context of usage, it doesn't necessarily mean that. It means that it is wrapped up in or is a part and parcel to. But specifically, I want to actually explain the metaphysical principle of consubstantiality in that it goes no further than something else. In other words, it can only be present when this is present, kind of like... this is a very loose thing, like warm weather, is necessary for palm trees or coconut trees to be present. You generally don't find these in upper Canada, right, unless they're indoors, right? In other words, when this is present, there is a place or route for that to become manifest, and it goes no further than that, right? So outside of a warm climate, you don't have mango trees and, exotic birds and stuff like that, as a very crude example. But there's also the philosophical statement over and over again, both the ancient Greeks and the ancient Indians, that state when this is present, that is present. When this is not present, then this is also not present. And a very simplex principle of understanding consubstantiality, everybody understands white light, right? Of course, this is just a little LED flashlight. And we're actually talking about, and also too, we're actually defining the two selves. By the way, it's very important to make a distinction between self and self, or little s and big S, if you will. One, of course, is the self, or the persona non grata, i.e. Bob, Sue, Larry, the psychophysical life or manifestation that someone says. And the Old English actually has this when they say, oh, nary was a soul wandering the street. Allow, look at all them souls. We would actually refer to people as souls, i.e. a living being. And of course, I always find this funny when people say, does an animal have a soul? Because that to me is extremely humorous, since the word animal literally means, the term means has a soul. The animation. And we actually can't falsely confuse one self with the other self. And this is, of course, the serious brain fart, excuse my language, that Buddhists, and Buddhists today are Buddhists in only name only. Buddhists in name only because they never read doctrine and they have no idea what they're talking about. Imagine if nearly 100% of Christians not only never read the Bible, analogously, never read the Bible, but if you gave them a free one, it's like, you're a Christian, you should probably, nah. That's how Buddhists are when it comes to doctrine. I hate to say it, but they're incredibly unintelligent. They are anti-intellectual, if you will. Because you'd think that you'd want to know about these things and further your understanding, since the as the ancient Pali commands, panna vimutta, liberation via wisdom. Wisdom is very important, not to be confused with empirical knowledge. Empirical knowledge is one thing, wisdom is another. We're actually talking about the consubstantiality of these two, and confusing one self for the other self, like the person that you see in the mirror, or the meat popsicle has been humorously called in movies. That, of course, is the persona non grata. That is the small self. That is the consubstantial self, which goes no further than the psychophysical. The most repeated phrase in ancient Pali, by the way, is isokaya namisata, which in English translation means this body is not myself. Self with a big S. I can't even begin to tell you how ignorant Buddhists are when it actually comes to this, because they think that anatta or anatman is a declaration of there being no soul, but it is only an adjectival qualifier set of other things. If I said this is not a coconut, and this is not a coconut, and this is not a coconut, would you therefore make the fallacy of composition that I said that coconuts don't exist? It's like, no. This is via negativa. This is disobjectification, which is also Greek theurgy. This is the apophaticism, which is part of my name, by the way, on YouTube. Theoria apophasis, which means theurgy, which is synthesis. Yeah, synthesis through objective negation. But in other words, by objective negation, you are actually engaging in subjective synthesis, not empirical machinations, but literally a noetic synthesis by objective negation. Kind of like, how do you find a needle in a stack of hay? Well, you don't go looking for it, you just set a match to the hay and everything burns away, and there is left, of course, the metal needle. But anyway, getting back to this, and this is a really hardcore fundamental thing that if you don't understand consubstantiality and think about it, you are never, ever, ever going to understand any form of Gnosticism. I don't care about Gnosticism, by the way. You're never going to understand Gnosticism, you're never going to understand Hermeticism, you're never going to understand Greek Platonism, you're never going to understand Pythagoras, you're never going to understand Advaita Vedanta, you're never going to understand any form of intelligent, logical, hardcore metaphysics. It's just never going to happen. We're talking about consubstantiality, and I'm going to define it here very simply in a way that anybody, I think, could intelligently understand. And of course, we could also talk about the radio. You know, of course, there's a broadcast station, right? Now, let's not go too far with the analogy. There's a radio broadcast on, say, 92 megahertz. That would be an FM broadcast. And of course, the audio that we're talking about would be the consubstantial. You remember back in the day, of course, nobody listens to radio anymore. So, man, that radio is hopping. The radio is jamming, right? You know, man, the radio. We'd actually talk about the life of the radio. Of course, the radio doesn't have life, but we're actually talking about the consubstantiality of the broadcast from whatever broadcast station that is tuned into by your radio in your car, whatever, your headphone radio, the consubstantiality of that signal to and with the radio. I love it when people ask me what happens to the soul after death, and of course death is not the opposite of life, it is the absence of life. Life, of course, is the consubstantiality of spirit and matter, and then of course we have life, right? We have animation. And of course, if the radio becomes broken, you know, then of course you can't tune the signal. Like if someone gets cancer, nasty cancer, and it progresses, you get a nasty disease, then of course your radio becomes broken, and of course the signal can't be tuned anymore, and then of course death occurs, because death is not the opposite of life, it is the absence of life. We actually have to define life. But anyway, let's get back to consubstantiality, and this is of course where you can easily, within your brain, perfectly understand the difference between the big S, self, i.e. the spiritus sanctum, the soul, the atman. I don't give a damn what word you call it. Words are just pathetic concepts to help with comprehension. The difference between the big S and the small s. Talking about the spiritus sanctum, let's just use the simple, you know, analogy of the white light right here. Okay, so what would be the vijnana? Unfortunately, in English, there's not a distinction between consciousness, mind, and brain. Unfortunately, in English, there is never, since really English metaphysics that are written in English have no hardcore insight, except for some, and these are Latin translations, like the Periphysian of John Scotus Erigena, and a very few others, and these are just basically rewrites of Platonism and Neoplatonism. There is never a principle of distinction or differentiation between consciousness and mind and the brain. Of course, the brain is just a corporeal lump, you know, like a like semi-hard jello. We all know what the brain is, but consciousness, by the way, the polytone for consciousness literally means agnosis, or ignorance. It's literally vi plus jnana. But mind, or in ancient Greek, nous, okay? We're talking about something that's pre-existent to the psychophysical, okay? And when we talk about life, we're talking about the consubstantiality of spirit and matter, which is life, right? Okay, let's just don't take the analogy too far. Don't take the metaphors too far here, okay? White light is so far as the spiritus sanctum in reference to an empirical consciousness, right? You know, when life is manifest. And of course, it changes throughout the decades, and then of course someone kicks the bucket. This is the consubstantiality of spirit and matter. Yeah, I think the white light, and I'll point it directly at the camera, you know, the white light through, this is an orange filter, I meant to grab a red filter. You know, the white light through the orange filter, we have orange light. It is said by both the ancient Greeks and the ancient Indians, the statement that goes over and over again, in various wordings, but meaning exactly the same thing. When this is present, that is present. Yes? But when this is not present, that is not present. In other words, the consciousness or empirical self, i.e. the persona non grata, Bob, Sue, Larry, Joe, Buffy, Muffy, whatever name you want to give, doesn't go any further than the psychophysical, right? But the psychophysical referring to is about life or animation. This would be the vijnana, this yellow light. I think it's orange, is an orange filter. This orange light would be the vijnana, would be consciousness. But it doesn't go any further than this. Actually, this is where the Buddhists are completely deranged. They are literally deranged because there is absolute refutation. Because in ancient Pali it goes rupa anatta, veda anatta, sanya anatta, sankara anatta, vijnana anatta, isokaya namisvata, nama rupa anattati. I know you don't know ancient Pali. Specifically, it says that the consciousness, which in absolute translation means ignorance, is not the self. But of course this is the self, but only the small self, right? This is the consubstantial self. Yes, this orange light you're seeing, of course you know immediately right now, I'm just holding up a white light through an orange filter. This orange light that is coming to your eyes and passing into the camera is of course the consubstantial self. It goes no further than the psychophysical. And of course at the breakup or death of the psychophysical, then of course, yeah, what happens then? What happens? What do I mean, or what is it an implication of, as far as the metaphysical principle of consubstantiality, that this orange light goes no further than the psychophysical? I think that's pretty simple, isn't it? This is, of course, the identification phenomenology of seeing self, the big S, and what is not the self. And what is not the self, of course, is the small self. Forms, feelings, perceptions, impulses, and empirical consciousness, i.e. the psychophysical, i.e. the persona non grata, i.e. that thing which you see in the mirror in your bathroom. Yeah? That form. And of course, we are all, and of course I don't want to use that analogy, I was about to make an analogy about the hand seeing itself as the sock puppet that is currently animating. I mean, it's kind of a crude analogy that's in reference to something else. But this is the consubstantiality spoken of. When this is present, that is present. This orange consciousness, this orange light is a mixture of course, the spiritus sanctum and the projection through. This is a consubstantial. In other words, this is two things as acting as one, right? This orange light is two things, is it not? Well, it's just orange light, you know. The white light is being filled. Don't take the analogy too far, for God's sake. This is what people that are too analytical do. They really take the analogy and take the metaphor too far. This orange light goes no further than the filter, correct? And this orange light that you see is, of course, two things, is it not? Yes, it is. It is the light in that band pass filter, which is this. That is the empirical self. That is the consubstantiality spoken of. White light through a blue filter, you're going to get blue light, right? White light shined onto a blue wall, blue light is going to come back to you, correct? That blue light goes no further than the mixture, or the methixis, the homoousion. Of course, it's actually not in reference to that thing. We're just talking about the metaphysical principle of consubstantiality, i.e. the combination, and it's not literally a combination, is a harmony. And this is, of course, the meaning, and it would take forever to describe this, of the ancient Pythagorean secret of yugata, actually tattooed on my knuckles here. People say, what's that ancient Greek tattooed on your knuckles? Well, it says yugata, Will take a long time. It's actually crudely translated as harmony, but it doesn't actually mean harmony. It's an actually reference, to the perfect mixture of. It doesn't mean health. Actually, Yucata is often translated as health, but it doesn't mean health. It means when there's harmony between spirit and matter, then of course things can, manifest more smoothly. They can exist. They can continue to exist for only a certain period of time. But if you don't understand consubstantiality, you can never understand any form of Greek or Indian, Platonic, Pythagorean, Neoplatonic monism. It's absolutely impossible. We're actually talking about the spatial temporal manifestation of a mixture of two things. Once again, as I said, death is not the opposite of life. It's the absence of life. This is life. Mixture of matter and spirit, right? And what continues through that, of course, is the animation, the small self. This is me in the mirror. My name is Bob. I'm 6 foot tall. I got, brown hair and green eyes. Sue, whatever. That is not the self. Like I said, this is where the Buddhists really screw things up hardcore, because there is an absolute denial of this, because it is consubstantial, which means it is comprised of more than one thing. Anything that has a beginning in time has an end in time, and it is not a point of refuge or of transcendence. It's impossible. If something has a Cartesian value, it is manifest in space and or time, and time is not a thing at all. Time is only a measure of magnitudes, and space has no properties whatsoever at all, as Nikola Tesla famously and accurately said. This is why he also called Einstein a fuzzy-haired crackpot. Whew. Sometimes I talk a little too fast. In my mind, I think I'm actually talking slow, but people tell me I'm always talking too fast. Sorry about that. My mind thinks about 100 times faster than this, not literally, but kind of close. 100 times faster than I'm actually talking right now. Sometimes I'll actually get 10 steps ahead of my brain as my lips are still flapping. But you actually have to understand this. You need to think about it, because this is what is meant by consubstantiality. It is incredibly important. We're talking about something that has a birth in space and time. And anything that is comprised of more than one principle, in this case matter and spirit, then it's not a refuge. It can't last. It's false. It's unreal. It's a projection. It's a hologram, if you will. People love talking about holograms. And man, I'm a hologram nut. But I don't like talking about holograms too much. But anyway, point being is that understanding of consubstantiality is absolutely vital for understanding any form of metaphysical monism, Gnosticism, Hermeticism, Platonism, on and on and on and on. Cannot grasp it without firmly setting that in your mind. Yeah? Do you understand that this is a mixture? This is one thing and this is another. This orange light is empirical consciousness. This white light is the spirit. These two things together in a psychophysical corpus is life, is animus. Yeah? Is animation. But that is not the refuge. That's not a point of transcendence. You can't polish a turd, as the saying goes, nor can you seek refuge into that which has both or either consubstantiality of existence, as means comprised of one or two or, of more than one thing, and has a footprint in its birth or its manifestation in space and time. It can't be, because whatever partakes of space and time is not a refuge, cannot be purified. This is what idiots do when they sit on little fancy zafus and zabutans, and they burn sandalwood incense, and they say, "Oh, I'm meditating. Oh, I'm seeking emptiness." I hate that word more than any other word, meditation, because it doesn't actually refer to anything. It's the most bastardized term in English language, or really in any. It's a horrible term. Doesn't refer to anything specifically. The point is disobjectification. In other words, it is removing, and of course this would be kind of a really crude analogy of wisdom, is understanding what this is and extracting this from this, such that when this dies and goes away, this doesn't identify as that. Yeah? If this identifies as that, the basis of transmigration would be, instead of this, after this has gone away, let's just assume this light is orange, by the way. What you have instead of this, which is self-identified as a self, ab extra to, prior to, and transcendent to this, instead of this, what you'll have is this. In other words, this, after this has passed away, gone away, still identifies as that. That is the actual metaphysical definition of hell. That is the actual metaphysical denotation of suffering, or dukkha. Seeing self in what is not the self. You know, when this goes away, if you still identify as this, you see this, let's just presume this red light is orange, okay, because I don't have an orange light. That is actual metaphysical hell. You want to get definition of hell in the truest term a la wisdom of the Platonists and Pythagoreans? That is it, by the way. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you like these videos. I could do 1,000 more like it, and I could talk on endlessly. Let me know if you like these. If you do, you can click the link below, and have a lovely day. Lux Iveritus.